Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome back to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
This week, we'll be talking about the election results, the future of the Democratic Party, and an interview with Democratic strategist Jon Reinish. After that, we'll talk about our lives on the Hill.
Welcome back, everybody. We are coming fresh off of a week of 2025 elections, and so much has happened that I'm excited to dig into, I think, because I feel like we were so bored for so long, and then finally there was a week where more than just the CR and the government shutdown happened.
I mean, election weeks are our Super Bowl, and so even on and off year, it's not a midterm, it's not a presidential year, I still think I woke up on election day and I was like, this is so exciting and fun. I was walking through with all of the fall changing leaves and I was like, this is such a good day.
You're like, it's November again.
I know, I'm like, I can't wait for exit polling.
No, literally, and that's so lame.
I know.
We're like, yay!
I was like, I cannot wait for exit polling to come out. This is going to be so exciting and so interesting.
It's fun, and I think like elections were half the reason I wanted to be a journalist. Like
Totally.
I've always wanted to be on the road. I've always wanted to be a campaign journalist, and so, you know, in the day-to-day, just like trudging life of being on Capitol Hill. Not that being a Capitol Hill reporter isn't rewarding, and you know, we're lucky to be in that job.
Totally.
The day-to-day can get a little exhausting, and I just the fact that we got to go on the road and be in so many different states as like the Examiner team, I think was just really fun.
And I feel like as a journalist, something that enticed us was not sitting and having a typical 9-to-5, a corporate job where you're just like sitting at a desk doing the same thing. And reporting everything you're doing every single day is different.
Yeah.
And so the campaign really does provide having a very different day-to-day. Like every day is a different rally. Every day you're talking to new voters or a new scandal that popped up.
Yeah.
Whereas on the Hill now, we've kind of been living that like Groundhog Day as we surpassed the longest government shutdown. We've now gone to over 100 press conferences, probably over the last month and some change.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what people in our profession that work on the Hill have been craving, is that movement that we're used to seeing in our everyday lives.
Yeah, and I think that the Hill used to be that way, which is so funny because we're like, it used to be, like it was years ago. It was literally like,
a month and a half
ago. We're like, I long for the days. But like, I do enjoy the campaign life because, as you said, something can happen in a split second. A special guest decides to pop up, or you know, a voter says something really interesting, and then 5 other voters back them up, and then suddenly you have a story after talking to people for 10 minutes. And I think that it's nice to get out and talk to everyday Americans to actually hear about the worries and the concerns that they have that maybe politicians on the Hill are either like not expressing, or they don't even really know themselves. And so you will get some people who are like, the press, I don't want to talk. But then you will find some chatty Cathys or some chatty Kens.
You will.
And they will love to talk. And I think also that's half the reason why we do our show in the first place, is to reach those voters. So when you can go and actually talk to them in person, you kind of bring back that knowledge of like, we're kind of doing something right.
Yeah, and I feel like it brings us back down to earth to what people want to hear. Whenever you're in DC, you can, like we've talked about before, get so caught up in the Beltway issues, whereas in the Beltway issues are not everyday issues for everyday Americans.
And I think that was very evident when you looked at the elections that happened last week.
Yes, so I mean, let's get into them.
Let's dig in.
We saw a major blue wave, which was expected. They were pretty Democratic states that had major elections. We saw New York City, we saw New Jersey. The Virginia governor's seat did flip, which is a little bit different than those pretty blue states, but talk to us a little bit about New Jersey.
Yes, I am fresh off of a week spent in New Jersey, and I'm exhausted. Being on the campaign trail is rough. You know, it's not always glamorous, but it is really fun. And so when I was in New Jersey, I did a lot of things. So I'm trying to remember all of them. I went to both Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican, and Mikey Sherrill, the Democrats, events. So they had rallies in their hometowns, which we got to attend. They had rallies at bars. They had rallies outside of voting places. And it was very cool to be there in the moment and hearing from these candidates, because one of them was going to be the next governor of the state. And like, as you said, New Jersey's blue. It's been blue for a while, and
It did trend towards Trump.
Yeah, it narrowed the margin significantly in 2024,
by
but he still lost
8 points. Like
I think less than that. I think like he almost won it by like 5.
Or he gained like 8 points.
Oh, yes, yeah. And so that was very on my mind going into these red areas and into these centrist areas. Me and my partner who traveled with me, we were very focused on the centrist areas, because in 2024, Trump flipped a very key county in New Jersey, which was Passaic County. And that had gone for Hillary Clinton back in 2016 by like 50 points. Joe Biden, I think it went for 16, so there was a huge gap in between that time. And then Trump won it in 2024, which is just so crazy that from 2016 to 2024, that gap of time, really, like, the demographics shifted. You saw a huge explosion of culturally conservative Hispanic voters moving into the area.
Is that we saw a shift of Latino voters that in 2024 shifted towards Trump, and then in 2025 we saw that shift back away kind of towards what they were voting like before 2024, which is really interesting. And I do think that that is extremely worrisome for Republicans going into the 2026 midterms, is that key group of voters, the Latino voters that shifted towards Trump in 24 and provided him that big win, did shift
You could
back.
argue it was the reason why he won. I mean, obviously there were like issues with the Harris campaign,
such a big
why he had
margin.
a huge, like a huge victory. And so, and you're right, we saw that in New Jersey. Mikey Sherrill, early exit polls, obviously, as we said, we're excited for the ones that come out, but early exit polls are showing that she ended up swinging the Latino vote back to her. And so when I was talking to strategists, there's a lot of different factors for that. One of that is voter turnout. Democrats, and this goes true for Virginia, this goes true for New York City, Democrats are just better at getting voters out in a non-presidential year. It's been that way for decades. And some strategists have told me that that's because Republicans just are not as good in the field. Democrats have traditionally gathered the youth, the young vote, and so those young people who are active and want to go in the fields and door knocking. You don't see a lot of that.
I mean,
energy
Democrats
with
also do
Republicans.
rely on smaller donors as well. Like, a lot of Democratic fundraising is from smaller donors, whereas a lot of Republican fundraising is from bigger donors, and I think that that's really seen in these like grassroots elections.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, though, that these strategists noted, and it was both Democrats and Republican strategists I talked to, long time ones who've been doing this for decades, they said that arguably, though, the reason why we saw such a blue wave in this 2025 year was because it's a rebuke of Trump's policies. And that was not something that we were all super surprised by.
No.
You know, once you get into office as a president, your approval rating goes down the second that you're a president, because you are getting hit by the previous administration's policies. You need to take time to undo them or do whatever. But then now that we're several months into Trump's presidency, he can't really blame things on the Biden administration anymore. And so now what Republicans kind of got a slap in the face for is that not only did these Democrats win in the blue areas, which we anticipated, but they saw historically voting blocks that went for Democrats but went to Republicans in 24, like Latinos, saw them go back blue. We saw local and state elections that were red for a long time flip blue for the first time in years. Georgia, Florida. You saw the fact that these counties, like Passaic County in New Jersey, these counties that Trump won, and it was a big deal that he did, and strategists were baffled by it, and they were like, oh, well, this is a turning point for the state. It just reverted back blue. And I think that the thing that we're seeing on the Hill, and you've been up on the Hill while I was gone, is that Republicans are very much trying to stamp this under the earth. Like, they are saying it's not indicative of 2026. We don't think that they mean anything. And I don't know about you, but I have some thoughts about that.
I don't think that that's true at all.
I don't think it's true either.
I think that is their way of messaging a Democratic wave, which is what they have to do. They can't sit there and be like, our policies aren't working.
They can't sit there and be like, no, we're worried.
Exactly.
I would be so surprised if I heard that.
And so they do need to convince their base that they're not worried, that they have a strong grip on Washington and on their voters, and that they're doing what they believe is the right thing to do.
Yeah. And especially in leadership, that's your job. Your job is to stay on message, to be connected in this little triangle trifecta you have, House Republicans, Senate Republicans, and President Trump all have to be in this little area. But I think what I found to be interesting is, and you had brought it up with the Latino vote specifically, that in the wake of these elections over the last, few days, we've seen members of Congress in these states that had these elections coming out, and they're Republicans, saying this is a sign that we need to make sure that we're taking care of our Hispanic voters, that we're making sure that we're digging into that demographic, because I think the problem that Republicans could fall victim to is being complacent and thinking that because Hispanics voted for Trump and they love Trump, that they're going to come out in 26 and vote for them just because there's a red R next to their name. And that's just not historically what happens.
I mean, I also think that with Latino voters, we are seeing what Trump and his administration is doing with immigration and ICE, and they said that they were going to do that on the campaign trail, so I don't think that it's necessarily the most surprising thing. But when people are seeing videos of people being targeted specifically for their race in the streets just by ICE officials. Like, that isn't great optics. Speaker
No.
Johnson last week was on Stephen A. Smith's podcast, and he kind of hammered him and was like, obviously this is what he said he was going to do, and that Biden's immigration policy wasn't working, but you have to agree with me that the optics aren't great.
What did he say?
He said, we're aware of the optics.
Oh,
He just said, we're
Okay.
aware of the optics. And then moved on. So it was kind of just typical Johnson deflection. But I do think that was him acknowledging that, like, it hasn't been the greatest optics with that group of voters. We saw young women. I mean, young women typically vote Democratic, but they swung pretty heavily blue in this election. And I think that these are just, like, some subsets of voters that had, like, swung a little bit right. Honestly, a lot in part to the Biden administration. A lot of people were unhappy with the Biden administration. But now we're seeing Trump kind of come in full force. It is the most, like, done in a presidency is done during the 100 days in the first year. So I think that people are really energized and upset right now. And that's why it did swing so much. You'll find this interesting. I was talking to a couple people on the Hill, and obviously polling showed everyone who was going to win won, but it showed much smaller margins than they won by.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody, and they were like, polls can only show they can't show apathy and they can't show energy. And I was like, that's really interesting, because it didn't show that Republicans were apathetic and didn't go out to the polls, but it also didn't show how energized the Democratic base was. And I think that that's what Trump is so worried about with the government shutdown. He made that Truth Social post that was like, we lost because I'm not on the ballot and because they're blaming us for the shutdown. And I think that him admitting to the American public that Republicans are being blamed for the shutdown was really interesting. It said a comma according to pollsters, which I thought was funny.
That's funny.
But I think it's interesting that he is bothered by the fact that Republicans are being blamed for the shutdown, and he is bothered that, like, Democrats are energized and Republicans were apathetic in this election. And I think that he's bothered not because I think that he is happy that his name is on the ballot, and that's kind of why he loves that.
Yeah.
You know how Trump is.
He loves the spotlight.
He loves the spotlight. But I do think that he's worried that swing is going to also taint his image.
I think that strategists have been sounding the alarm on apathy for a very long time. I remember when Dick Durbin announced that he wasn't running for Senate anymore, and that was going to open up the race for the first time in my lifetime. I mean, he's held the seat since 1987.
Wild.
I was born in 2000. Not to make myself a child, but I was. And so, like, to me, that race has a lot of impact for me, obviously, because I'm from Illinois. And I remember speaking to Republican strategists and being like, this is an opportunity, albeit a small one, for Republicans to come in. And one strategist said, the biggest thing that's going to hurt Republicans in this Senate race is not going to be the fact that we don't have a good candidate. We could have somebody like Darren LaHood. We could have a strong Republican at the state level come in for the race. The thing that will kill us, essentially, is the fact that everybody is like, well, we won the trifecta, so we're done now. And that's just not good, especially for Republicans being horrid at voter turnout in a non-presidential year, and especially since Trump came on the scene. Trump motivated voters in a way that people hadn't seen in a very long time. And so the fact that he won't be on the ballot in 2026, as of now, won't be on the ballot in 2028, I think that what the 2025 election showed is that they have a serious problem. And I do think that it is to Johnson and Republicans on Capitol Hill's detriment to get up there and say, don't be worried. I understand why they have to do it. But I think that the problem is that their Republican voters that are maybe centrist conservative might be sitting here going, wow, like, we just elected, some moderate Democrats in these elections. I mean, obviously not Mamdani. We'll talk about him in a minute. But like Cheryl and Spanberger ran on this centrist, I'm affordability, I'm here for you, no social issues, barely even mentioned the National Democratic Party in their campaigns. They ran the campaign that I think a lot of Democrats have been craving for, and I think that should cause Republicans a lot of concern. And I know that right now they're focusing on Mamdani and they're saying that, communism's taking over the country. We'll also talk about that. But, like, I think that it is in their peril to not take this seriously, because now, it's a full year until the 2026 midterms. And if they don't start doing something about it right now, they were already kind of projected to lose the House just by historical flips, but now they could lose it because of their just, inability to admit when they're wrong. And I think that that's a problem that they suffer from.
I also think that, like, the emotion that drives most voters is fear. Like, fear is the number one driver to get people out to vote. We've seen it time and time again, and that's why typically in the midterms, whatever party is holding the White House, it swings the opposite way because the other party is fearful of what's happening with those policies, whereas the party in power is kind of stagnant because they're seeing the policies that they voted for. Maybe if they're not happy with the policies they voted for, they're going to get out and vote in the midterms.
Right.
But
if they're happy with it, then they're like, well, why would we get out?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, we saw it in 2010. There was a big red wave after Obama was elected, and we're kind of seeing that now. We saw it in 2022. There was supposed to be a red wave. There was not really. And now.
And in 2021, though, as you bring up red waves,
yes.
And this is what I thought was so interesting about Johnson's comments when you were talking to me about it from being on the Hill, was that, Johnson is saying like, this means nothing, off-year elections mean nothing. In 2021, when there were off-year elections and Virginia had a red wave in the state, it was kind of the biggest one that they had seen for quite some time. Johnson himself, as a congressman at the time, just a rank and file, put out a statement saying like, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but it was like, red wave in Virginia, this is great, our policies are working, people are over it, like hashtag 22 midterms, here we come. So like, yeah, now that he's, in leadership, he's not going to say that. But I think it just does show that just because they're saying that it's not indicative, every party's going to say that if they're not in power. But that doesn't erase the fact that they are truly an indication of what's to come.
Yeah.
And you said something interesting, too, about how, like, fear is the biggest motivator. And I feel like for a long time, and I think of the Hunger Games when I say this, that, like, in like the Hunger Games movies where they're like, hope is the only thing stronger than fear. I think that is what Democrats are trying to do right now, is they are trying to capitalize on hope.
Well, that gets me to whenever I learned about like fear being the number one emotion to get voters out, nobody has voted based on hope since Obama. And this is what we talked about a lot in like all of my political science classes in college, and it stuck with me so much. We like really honed in. I took a capstone in civic engagement, and that's where we like really talked about how like the main factor in voters is fear, or the main emotion in voters is fear. And that's why Obama was like the last major face of the Democratic Party, is because he was the first person in forever that people voted on based on hope and not on fear.
Wow, interesting.
Which is really interesting. And I was talking to Jon Reinish, who you will hear from in a little bit here, and he made such a good point to me. He was like, ever since Obama, and we didn't talk about the hope thing, but I'm now kind of putting them together.
Yeah.
He brought this such a wave of hope that after we had such like a big leading face, the party, I don't want to say crash and burned, but kind of crashed, because we have not had a major like Democratic leader of the party since Obama, and we saw that because he kind of came back in these elections, and he drove the elections a good amount.
Especially in New Jersey. I think that he was incredibly helpful.
Proposition 50 in California, like he was really involved. I will say that I think that Trump is that kind of like, I think that a lot of people vote for or against Trump out of fear, but I do think that a lot of people vote for Trump out of hope of like a new Washington.
Yeah.
And John kind of pointed out, he was like, after you have a leader that held that much power and people voted for with like, from my perspective, that much hope, the party doesn't know where to go after that, which is what happened to Democrats and now like could happen to Republicans in a post-Trump era, which I never thought of like that. It kind of was like a...
But I think it is kind of mind-blowing, especially when you look at the candidates. And I think that something that you said that was interesting is that the fact that the party hasn't had like a really strong leader in a long time. We're still seeing a lot of that void. And I don't think that right now, especially with Joe Biden out of the scene, we don't really have somebody to lead this Democratic Party. And so that's why I think Republicans have been pointing to, as Zohran Mamdani is the future of the Democratic Party, because there is that vacuum. And the vacuum got even bigger last week when it was actually kind of crazy. I got a little emotional about it because she's just been around for forever. But like Nancy Pelosi, who was the speaker, first female speaker in U.S. history, she's retiring.
The only female speaker in U.S. history.
Female speaker, actually. And so, she is retiring. And it's so crazy because she started her career in 1987. And so she's been...
almost 4 decades in Congress.
Yeah, and so she has been just a powerhouse. And I think that I saw a lot of this, and I was talking to some Republican staffers about this, that for better or for worse, if you didn't like her policies, if you were a Republican and she was a Democrat, everybody, mostly, like 90% of people, think that she was a powerhouse and she was great for who she was.
She was an incredible speaker objectively.
Yes, and a great legislator and a great leader. I mean, she literally, if she was in charge of the government, there'd be no shutdown. Like, she would whip that into shape. And so I think that is what is so interesting, is that now she's leaving.
Yeah.
And even when she's been in Congress, nobody's really looked to Hakeem Jeffries as the leader of the party. And I don't really think that that's anything that he's doing wrong.
He has also only been minority leader, which is for very different
3 years.
Yeah, but I do think that minority leader and speaker have very different jobs.
I think given the opportunity, he could step up and maybe really
you're not really given
resounding.
that job as like a leader of a party whenever you are a minority leader. I was talking though to a Democratic staffer last week whenever the whole Pelosi thing happened, and he was like, Obama and Biden owe almost their entire legislative legacy to Pelosi, because Pelosi got that legislation across the finish line, the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare.
Yeah,
it got across the finish line because of Pelosi, and that is President Obama's biggest accomplishment in office.
And now it's like the main focus of the government shutdown.
Exactly.
I'm sure that's surreal for her, is to have worked on this.
Yes.
Literally was the driving force to get it through the chambers and to the desk of the president.
Yes.
And now it's the fight again for her. I honestly am not surprised that she's like, yeah, I already did this once. I need to.
She's like, I've been doing this for 12 years, 14 years.
Yeah. And I just think it will be interesting to see a Washington without her, and it will be interesting to see what leadership steps up. And I think that then tying this back to the elections, this gives an opportunity, I think, and what we saw in New York City, now we can dive into New York City a little bit, is what happened in New York is a sign that, and we've been talking about this for a while, but I think this is the first time that it's actually true, that younger Democrats, progressive Democrats, are tired of the old guard and they want them out. And I think the fact that Mamdani not only won, which we expected him to, but performed so resoundingly with so many different people. You probably have the facts more than I do, but in terms of polling. But I think that it is very interesting to see how he was able to rally all of those people, young and old, just from presenting ideas of new and change, and just honestly being kind of a normal person. I think in terms of like his personality, maybe not in the sense of his policies, but I think like he was really able to connect with people in a way that the establishment Democrats have been kind of apathetic to.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it earlier. He was just so New York, which I think is. Yeah. I think that that is so cool. This race has been so extremely fascinating to me. We talked about it last week. We've never seen a mayoral candidate reach this level of, for lack of a better word, fame.
Yeah.
But he tapped so much into being New York. He rode the bus to debates. He was at clubs leading up to the election.
He just walked the streets and just went and sat down next to people and was like, hey, how are you? What issues bother you?
He was campaigning with influencers. He was just meeting the moment so well that I don't think that not that people didn't care about his policy. People are very passionate about his policy. But even people who don't necessarily align with that wing of the Democratic Party aligned with him because of his charisma, because of his ability to capture those voters and bring a new sense of the Democratic Party that's been around. Washington has been the same, and I hate to do parallels of the Democratic Party to Trump, but there is so many. We talked about charisma and candidates, but if you look at it, Republicans loved Trump because he was anti-Washington, he was anti-establishment, and he brought a new, fresh voice to an institution.
I think people liked the fact that Trump was blunt and he said what he said, and he didn't apologize for it, and he was not afraid to call people out from his own party, from the other party. And I think that now you're seeing, and obviously Mamdani and Trump are not the same, but you're seeing the same with just in general this progressive crop of Democrats who saw in 2024 the fact that, Biden, the way Biden was handled and the way that Harris's campaign was run, and then the fact that people weren't listening to what young Democrats on the ground wanted.
Listening.
They weren't listening. And so New York, even though it is just a mayoral race, I feel like that's something that needs to be stressed. It is just a mayoral race.
Yes.
He's not the governor. He's not a senator. He's not a member of Congress. He is just a mayor. And being a mayor is a very important job. But
they bring in billions of dollars. They spend billions of dollars. Being mayor of New York is a massive job.
But it's not so huge that people, in the West need to be worried about how he is going to impact them. What it will change, though, is the fact that he is a sign that in your own state, miles away from New York, you could see a similar young, charismatic person who just meets the people and meet the moment. You're going to see more of that. And Republicans are already saying that, and they're turning it into a negative, saying that Democratic socialists are going to take over.
Yeah.
And that could be true, that you might see some more Democratic socialist candidates. But I think also Mamdani's campaign showed that you can actually start at the bottom. A lot of people are like, on grassroots candidates, they can't do anything,
Yeah.
they can't get anywhere. I was reading something like his own team projected that he'd win like 3%.
Insane.
Like they thought that he wasn't going to go anywhere, and then he literally just exploded. And so I think
Democrats
that
love a dark horse candidate.
they love it. They love an underdog. And so I just think the fact that while people are so obsessed right now with the fact that New York is going to just take over everywhere, that's not true. But what it will do is it will show that in your own home state of Montana, in your own state of Florida or Ohio, you could see candidates like this who are able to do and bring the movement that Mamdani was able to do.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be stuck in just those borders.
I mean, I think that that's the problem, though, with Republican leadership like Johnson leaning so much into the Mamdani train, is that if you're messaging on Mamdani and trying to make Mamdani the face of the party, like the boogeyman, nobody outside of New York City is feeling the effects of his policies. People in Texas don't care, because it's not affecting them. Like we
People
care
who care are the people on social media who are like, a young man who is charismatic and from all intents and purposes look just like a normal guy is now running the show, and they're like, that's cool.
And what 2025 showed us is that people care about the issues that are directly in front of them. People care about affordability. People care about energy prices, like we saw in New Jersey, and New York City is not right in front of them.
No.
And if 2025 showed everyone anything, it is that the issues that are in front of voters are what they care about most. And Mamdani is just not in front of these voters. And so I think this is a different train of thought. Earlier you talked about Cheryl and Spamberger really campaigning on those issues that are in front of Americans, like affordability. I think that it's really interesting. They did it in more of a centrist way, whereas Mamdani did it in definitely a farther left way. But Mamdani also did campaign on affordability more than anything else, which is interesting because they both campaigned on affordability just in
different ways. And they catered to their people. And so that's what I think is also fascinating about that, is that you can talk on the same issue and you can still, stick to those, centrist kitchen table ways. And I think that a lot of Democrats have been eager and crying out for a lot of their party and their own members to do that. I mean, after the 2024 election, a lot of Democrats said, we didn't focus enough on kitchen table issues. We were way too, focused on social and just were anti-Trump. We had no agenda. But then you go look at the two candidates, like Mikey Sherrill and Zohran Mamdani are two completely different candidates. Couldn't be more different, actually.
And it's crazy because they're so close. We have Jersey City and New York.
When I was in Newark, I could literally look and see the skyline. It's so close. And I guess I didn't know that being from a Midwest gal, but it was crazy to me. And I think it is crazy that these two people couldn't be more different on paper. But then when they're going out and speaking on the same thing, it does show that those issues matter. And some strategists have said that that people say that they care about the economy, but really they just vote along party lines when it comes to off-year elections or midterm elections. And that's probably true. You see a lot of, very rarely do you see people flipping parties. But
I feel like it used to be more common, but now with hyperpartisanship and echo chambers, as we have talked about over and over again on this show, we don't see that as much anymore. I feel like growing up, I feel like there was a lot of Bush-Obama voters or Obama-Romney voters. I think that was a lot more common, but...
Because back then it was, you were two great candidates. You just had two, honestly, kind of similar ideas how to put the country back on track. And you saw politeness in debates, and you saw social media wasn't as big of a thing as it was back then. So there wasn't that Twitter X just post after post after post chamber. But I just think it is crazy to me how much that affordability, and I think that circles back to our first point, that Republicans are in trouble because they campaigned on lowering costs. They campaigned on inflation. They campaigned on this and that when it came to the economy. And so far, there hasn't been a ton to show the American people. They keep messaging that gas prices are down and grocery prices are down. But then you go and talk to voters in these centrist communities who say, that's not true. I'm at the store every day. They're not.
Yeah.
You're putting out a message that prices are down, but I'm going to the store and they're exactly the same or they're higher, especially now with tariffs. So I think that is the problem, is that I think Republicans were apathetic to the fact that these centrist communities and ones that were kind of tired of Democrats' social games went back to them because they're like, well, you're not doing anything for us, so we're just going to go back to voting Democrat and see if that is better.
Yeah. Yes. But up next, we have our interview with Democratic strategist Jon Reinish.
I'm here with Jon. He is a Democratic strategist
Thanks for joining us on Capital Conversations today. Can you just give us a little overview about the elections that happened this year?
Yeah, there's no other way to describe this week's elections than a blue wave that swept across the country. Um, Off-year elections are traditionally the biggest predictor of what's going to happen in the following year's midterms. In this case, in November of 2026, a year away. Um, these off-year elections, the marquee races of which are governors' races in New Jersey and in Virginia, are thought to be especially predictive, and I certainly think that they were. Um, but there were also so many other races, thousands of them, county and local and municipal races, county legislative chairs, judges, more obscure statewide elected officials. Democrats swept all of them. So last night can be considered to be a really good night, but there's a lot of fascinating stories within each of these races to really unpack as we have a smart discussion about what it means for the future.
Totally. I think that one of the biggest things I've noticed, like even leading up to the election, before the election, is how fascinated I've been by major Republican leaders taking the new mayor-elect Mamdani and running with like city elected official. Has been wild to see them turn somebody that's not even statewide elected into the new Republican Party boogeyman. I think that the Republican Party has kind of struggled with finding a boogeyman that sticks. Like they've turned to Jasmine Crockett, they've turned to Chuck Schumer, and now they're turning to Zoran Mamdani, whereas the Democratic Party just kind of always has Trump to turn to because Trump has been around for forever. What are your thoughts on that? And also kind of going off of that, Mamdani has kind of taken the fire off of Gavin Newsom, who is now kind of in the front running for 28 after he had the Proposition 50 win. How has like the shift of Mamdani being the boogeyman, one, helped Gavin Newsom, and two, been kind of a crazy shift from the Republican Party?
Sure. Well, look, it is no surprise that immediately after Mamdani was declared the victor, you saw really senior Republican operatives start to tweet about Mamdani, post statements about Mamdani that actually started quite some time ago. Look, there's going to be a concerted effort heading into the midterms where races are not won and lost in very blue, very liberal, super progressive cities. Those races are going to be won and lost in swing states, in swing districts. Point taken. Zoran Mamdani's politics do not always play there. Socialism does not play there. However, I will say this. Zoran Mamdani is mayor of New York. He ran for mayor of New York. He is, going to serve in that office for 4 years. He's not running for Congress. He's not running for Senate. He's not running for anything else that will affect any constituent anywhere else. The only place that I can really see Mamdani's effect translate out of New York City is in New York State itself. I think that's going to be very interesting to look at. Marquee governor's race, marquee House races. In fact, possibly the race for the House could take place here. If you're Elise Stefanik, very likely to be the Republican nominee, who's an extremely fearless campaigner in the Trump style. She's very likely to tie Mamdani to everybody up and down the ballot around New York City. But again, really remains to be seen if that works or not. What last elections did show us is that people care about what happens in their homes and in their backyards. Zoran Mamdani is not happening in any home or backyard outside of New York City and its 5 boroughs. So again, they're going to try, remains to be seen. One more point that I will make. Zoran Mamdani was not the big story from last night. Abigail Hamburger and Mikey Sherrill were the big story from last night. Virginia and New Jersey, let's unpack it. Virginia has become a blue state. New Jersey, traditionally a blue state, but it's gotten real purple recently. Donald Trump made massive inroads. Republicans picked up House seats there recently. Phil Murphy, the outgoing Democrat governor, only won by 3 points in the last election. Kamala Harris won by only 5 after having seen Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and God knows Barack Obama post massive double-digit wins. We had really slipped there. Mikey Sherrill won by double digits, flipped counties, made red counties a lot bluer. Abigail Spanberger, even more so, winning by 15 points, granted against a deeply flawed candidate in Winston nobody thought would win. But Abigail Spanberger brought a 2/3 now-majority in the Virginia House of Delegates. That proves Democrats were winning not just at the macro level, the micro level. And that is really, really crucial. And she took counties that had not been on anybody's list as competitive or swingy and accelerated her party's wins by point after point after point. These are two young women, young moms with national security, public safety bona fides. It's why they won in 2018. So you have to look at the totality of victories last night. You can't cherry pick them. Every winner is the future of the party.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, going off of New Jersey and Virginia, we saw a big shift in Latino voters, which was a pretty big base that was a decisive factor in 2024. Can you talk to me a little bit about the shift in Latino voters to the left in the 2025 elections comparatively to 24?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is, what was a roar last night around the country started as a rumble in some local elections that happened over the last few months. Specifically, though she has not been seated yet, Adelita Grijalva in Arizona outperformed Harris Waltz by 17 points, including driving Democratic turnout and Democratic votes far, far up among Hispanic voters, including along the border, where Democrats had really slipped in the last several elections. Zohran Mamdani, for all my differences with his politics, and there are many, Zohran Mamdani went way into Dominican neighborhoods in the Bronx, Queens, Upper Manhattan, and captured back a lot of those Trump voters in Latino and Black communities who had gone to the Republican side in the last several elections. He met them where they were and he listened. And that was really smart. To your point, to get back to your question, in Virginia and New Jersey, you saw so many Latino voters come back. I have to say, I think that was because Democrats laser focused on cost of living, public safety, did not, thank God, say the word Latinx one time. Never say that again. That appeals to woke white progressives and not to actual Hispanic and Latino people. So no one said Latinx. Everyone talked about public safety and household cost issues. But also, I think that there is going to be, and we'll see much more about this next year, and as a midterm year progresses, a massive backlash in Latino and Hispanic communities when you see the targeting of Latinos and Hispanics by ICE, when you are seeing parents and kids separated in courthouses and on the street, and people being picked off, and people being physically abused and ripped from their churches and schools and businesses, and you see hardworking people abused and treated terribly, and when you see people thrown to the ground in front of your children, you take that really personally and really seriously. So that is a one-way ticket to erasing any gains that you may have made in recent election cycles. It's sure to be a backlash.
Now let's move across the country a little bit. We saw Proposition 50 in California pass to redistrict to kind of net gain those 5 seats back that were taken from Texas. That was a massive win for Newsom, the governor Gavin Newsom, who has taken kind of a Trump-esque messaging strategy in the recent months. It's been interesting for me to watch that Republicans really haven't been going after Newsom. They kind of gave up on Proposition 50. Democrats outspent them by a twofold. And then, I mean, Republicans' focus has really only been on Mamdani. Do you think that the focus on Mamdani has taken the heat off of Newsom and kind of paved a pathway for him to be the 28 nominee along with his win?
Sure. I don't know if it's sort of a binary choice between them. Your point is well taken, though. Like, Republicans have been playing this sort of like whack-a-mole. For so long, Nancy Pelosi was the liberal San Francisco hippie mama, super, super lefty boogie woman. Then it switched to AOC. Hillary Clinton's no longer such a focus. Kamala Harris, skyrocketed for a minute and then lost terribly. And then it's been going from, to your point, Jasmine Crockett. They've tried with Gavin Newsom. Look, I'll tell you this, Gavin Newsom, for the past several months has been fascinating. He was really effective both as a fighter, but also as a bridge builder with the president during the California wildfires. He delivered leadership where Mayor Bass really floundered and did not. Then he has emerged as this sort of social media content on steroids, sort of flip side of MAGA style, social media provocateur. When the fire is given back, the opposition party hasn't really kind of known what to do with it. It has proven difficult when the person bringing it to you is not speaking in, sartorial consultant language, but is showing images of Ultimate Fighter Championship that's supposed to be Trump territory. That's been interesting to see. But he delivered an actual policy and massive political win for his state last night, campaigned on it, raised money for it, staked a lot on it. So he has certainly emerged even, stronger of a contender and a standard bearer. Though I did notice this morning he was posting Ultimate Fighter Championship, UFC type content again. So it's not a choice. You can pursue any of these strategies at once if you're Gavin Newsom. But yeah, his bona fides emerged, burnished last night. There's no such thing as a glide path, though. I want to caution against that for the 2028 election. There were huge wins at the local, statewide, if obscure elected offices in Georgia last night. That is someone like, John Ossoff's race, or, as a contender, Raphael Warnock. Democrats held on by massive margins to 3 very important Supreme Court state judgeships in Pennsylvania. That adds to Josh Shapiro's already star quality. Wes Moore announced a redistricting commission to try to squeeze another district out and fight fire with fire in Maryland. Andy Bashir is doing the podcast circuit and doing a kind of any and all media strategy. That's really smart. There's a lot of good people.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Andy Bashir's Vanity Fair shoot. I mean, he is doing a pretty big media.
Yeah, he went on with Keith Edwards, who's a Democratic rising star on the podcast and streamer circuit, who's got a couple million followers. It's not on MSNBC. It's not on CNN. It's not on CBS This Morning. It's a streamer. It's a podcaster with a couple million followers.
I mean, I think that we've seen a major shift in that we saw. I mean, I think that one of the most fascinating for me recently has been James Tallarico in Texas. He went on Joe Rogan, and then, I mean, now he's a lead candidate in the Texas Senate race that is extremely crowded. And I mean, this kind of moves me into my next question. We saw Obama weigh in on James Tallarico. We saw Obama weigh in on Proposition 50. We saw him campaigning with Spamberger and Cheryl. Yeah. Do you think that Obama still has major pull in the Democratic Party? And did him on the campaign trail kind of remind everyone of what they loved about him?
So just to be blunt, we don't have anyone else. Nobody wants to hear from Joe Biden. Next, nobody wants to hear from Kamala Harris. I mean, really, nobody wants to hear from Joe Biden, from his wife, from anyone around him, from anyone associated with him. They are reviled. Nobody wants to see them ever, 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 ever again. Harris, she's selling her book. I don't think anyone's getting, I think she's getting big requests to come and stump for people. Let's just put it that way. And the Clintons have handed off the torch. Obama is still someone for whom there is great affection. Democrats have not won, and winning is all that matters in politics. There's no such thing as moral victories. We haven't won, quite frankly, since 2008 and 2012. Obama draws the crowds. Obama draws the affection. He's still a great message carrier, if even a little grayer, and with a more complex look at his political legacy. But yes, he still draws the crowds. He's still it. He is what we got. And and he can be a turnout machine.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of him being a turnout machine, obviously we saw major victories that were way bigger than any polls showed in New Jersey and Virginia. Do you think that he had something to do with making those margins bigger whenever he was campaigning with them?
He certainly could not have hurt. The fact that and could only be looked at as a net positive. The fact that he showed up and did massive rallies, drawing numbers that only he can at that level, certainly helped to juice turnout. I had friends who had never gone to a political rally before in Jersey City, in Newark, where Mikey Sherrill knew that she needed absolute sky high numbers where Harris and Biden's numbers had slipped, certainly from Obama and even from the Clinton days. She knew she had to have massive numbers in those counties. Look, Mikey Sherrill was, supposed to win by mid-single digits, and wow, did she overperform. So that was pretty incredible to see. What was so interesting also was to see the naysayers from the far left and the naysayers from the far right. Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spamberger, the squishy center, they're so moderate, no real message. Tell that to two women who just won by double digits.
And then lastly, I mean, with Texas specifically, but kind of redistricting in general, when Republicans are redistricting, they are kind of diluting ultra red districts and moving them more towards what could be a swing district. Do you think that a blue wave should concern Republicans in these states that they're redistricting and diluting some of these pretty Republican districts?
Well, look, Democrats have been incredibly ignorant in the past when they have ignored red waves or red wins. The fact that, going back to in my kind of earlier days working in politics, the extraordinary, and Democrats still have not recovered from it, the red tsunami of 2010 that Democrats, again, have not recovered from at the local and state legislative level, et cetera. The signs were there when Chris Christie won by massive numbers, when Bob McDonnell won by massive numbers, Scott Brown's win in deep blue Massachusetts. So, and Democrats did not really pay attention and paid the price a year later. So Republicans should be doing the same thing. Again, when you go into not just the 30,000 feet up result of winning the governorship, you want to, if you're a Republican, you're really concerned about those county and local numbers and wins. You are very concerned that in the ultimate swing state of Pennsylvania, Democrats turned out in a wave for, a state Supreme Court, that is obscure. So the fact that Democrats spent money and turned people out and made a movement out of winning those 3 state Supreme Court seats, that is a cause for concern. And again, if you look at Georgia, these, and I can't even, forgive me, remember the title, they're so obscure, of one of those, but they're important. People turned out for them. The numbers were big. People felt invested in a reason to volunteer, to turn out, to put money into these races. Georgia and Pennsylvania are electoral prize. Massive Senate races, governor's races, God knows presidential for 2028. So if you drill down there, here's the other bigger point that we haven't talked about, but it's interesting. The president truthed, and I think it was last night, about
this was really
Trump is not on the ticket.
interesting.
And he's right. Trump is the king, the emperor of vote getting for the Republican Party. He won so massively and so decisively in 2024, not just by turning his own people out, but by people who hadn't voted before, infrequent voters, subprime, low propensity, whatever you want to call it. What are they going to do without Trump at the top of the ticket? He's their vote getter. Look, you brought up Obama before. We have not had a vote getter. We still don't. The way that Barack Obama was for us, we have struggled. Democrats have struggled so much because a vote getter at that level, a turnout spurrer at that level, has not come to pass. we've had really underperforming candidates since Barack Obama. Republicans should look at what has ailed us so badly since 2012 and say, what are we going to do? And look, the strategists at the top of the Republican Party are some of the smartest people in the business. You know that they have to be looking at that today.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, and I'm really glad that you brought that up because I hadn't even thought of it like that. And I mean, I think that all of us in politics, especially probably people that will watch this show, are pretty political nerds, and that is a
Yeah.
really good point that is something to think about whenever we're looking at a post-Trump era. But thanks for joining me today on Capital
Thank you.
to discuss all of the election results.
Look forward to seeing this into the story. Let's talk more. It's really fun.
Welcome to our Q&A section, my favorite part. And so this question is from Laura, and she asks, is the healthcare CR expiring soon? Well, no, yeah. Like, there's two different things.
Both are expiring soon.
Both are expiring. So there is no healthcare CR. And this is actually a great question.
It is a really good question.
People are confused.
And I think that this is what Johnson is so frustrated on this.
Yes.
He, like I said on the Stephen A. Smith podcast, he was like, this is not a healthcare vote. This is not a healthcare vote. Democrats are lying. Like, this is not a healthcare vote. Like we've said, this is their negotiation time on healthcare subsidies that are expiring. But yes, the November 21st continuing resolution is expiring.
Yeah, so they're two different things. So the CR deals with the 12 bills that fund the government. So that goes to like the Defense Department and the Agriculture Department. It funds SNAP benefits. It funds the military, things like that. But then the healthcare subsidies are not part of government funding. So it's not like it's part of the appropriations process, giving money to these different agencies and programs. So yeah, that one expires at the end of November. And with the time that they have left, it's pretty much like a moot point at this, stage. Like they what are they going to do? Vote on it and then 3 days later have to have a new CR? Yeah. Like that's kind of crazy. I mean, they can do what they want.
Yeah, they can do what they want.
Not my us, but so the healthcare subsidies though, they are expiring December 31st, which that was, and this is something that Republicans have pointed out.
And I don't think it's a bad argument.
That Democrats set that date. They set the date.
They could have made them permanent.
They could have made it permanent if they wanted to. And I think that now, if you look back.
And I'm sure that came with negotiations, like we saw in reconciliation.
And we were not journalists at that
exactly.
time.
Like we saw with the Big Beautiful Bill, there were a lot of negotiations. There were a lot of things. People wanted Medicaid work requirements immediately. They met in the middle. They did 2020. Whoa. 2026. So I do think that I'm sure that was just like an outcome of negotiations, but they did set them to expire, which is a big argument of Republicans, which I don't think that they're wrong to.
They're not wrong to point that out. It's true. And so I think that what we're going to be tracking is what happens, I think, with this ACA. I think the ACA credits are the more fascinating thing about this now than the CR is. At the beginning, I think the CR was fascinating because it was something that Freedom Caucus had gotten behind. Like, everyone was behind it. Like,
which we've said, usually a lot of Republicans are against continuing resolutions.
But they were like, no, let's do it. And so I think that was what was fascinating about that. And then it went to the Senate, and it was fascinating that, you had a couple Republicans voting against it. You had Senate Democrats voting against it. I think that the fact that now, though, that the time has expired so much, I think the thing that people are looking at now is the way that these ACA tax credits have just kind of invaded the negotiations.
Yeah.
And so, and kind of going back to Pelosi, like Pelosi, that was such a big staple of her. And now for her leaving Congress, I mean, she's not leaving, tomorrow, but like she's leaving at the cusp of these Affordable Care Act subsidies, up to bat again. And so I think that what people should be paying attention to is when we get closer into November, December, because, December 31st is when they expire basically at the end of the year, before January. And so I think that is, you're going to see some sort of deal. It's just not certain what it's going to look like and how long it's going to take.
And it's also like the ACA subsidies affect millions of Americans. And
in red and blue counties. Actually, a lot of people in red counties.
Which I mean is, in my head, kind of similar to how we're seeing SNAP benefits affect a lot of red counties. And that is, I think that it'll be really interesting to see how that bodes with Republicans and if that kind of is a wake-up call to them when and if these ACA subsidies do expire, how the government shutdown bodes. And I think that we're just going to have to wait it out for that to happen. But that's a wrap. Thanks for watching Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
And as always, make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, watch us on YouTube, on Spotify, and as always, make sure to read at WashingtonExaminer.com.